The Frame Game, Mastering Social Alchemy. Introduction. We navigate the currents of existence with a persistent illusion that we perceive reality with unvarnished objectivity. A traffic jam is merely a temporal impediment. A social gathering is simply an assembly of acquaintances. A conversation, a straightforward conduit for thoughts. But what if the tapestry of your experience diverges from the fabric of what is? Consider this. Two souls ensnared in the identical chokehold of traffic can inhabit vastly disparate internal landscapes. One might be consumed by a suffocating wave of frustration, perceiving it as a cosmic affront, a harbinger of their life's unraveling. The other, however, might embrace it as an unsolicited interlude of quietude, a fertile ground for absorbing a podcast or simply drawing a restorative breath. The identical event, birthing two utterly divergent realities. This is not sorcery, it is the potent architecture of frames. Envision these frames as the ocular lenses of a camera. They do not alter the intrinsic scene, yet they profoundly reshape its perception, its chromatic hues, its focal acuity, its very emotional resonance. These frames are the unseen perspectives, the implicit assumptions, and the cognitive heuristics we instinctively deploy to render the world comprehensible. They operate with a subtle stealth, sculpting our thoughts, our sentiments, and our actions, often without our conscious assent. This volume, The Frame Game, Mastering Social Alchemy, embarks on an exploration of these frames. It is an invitation to apprehend that a multitude of social exchanges are, at their core, a nuanced contest for dominance, a subtle skirmish over whose perspective, whose frame will ultimately prevail. And by mastering this intricate game, you can reclaim dominion over your inherent power, your emotional equilibrium, and, by extension, orchestrate the outcomes you genuinely covet. We shall delve into the art of transmuting vexing social predicaments into crucibles of growth, a process I term social alchemy. The most captivating and, at times, exasperating facet of these frames is their dual nature. They are not solely constructs of our own making, but are perpetually imposed upon us. A gesture, such as arms crossed, might be instantaneously interpreted as a signal of defensiveness or a manifestation of discontent. Should you then react, protesting, "I am not defensive," you have already conceded defeat. You have internalized their frame. They have decreed you defensive, and in your earnest attempt to refute their decree, you have willingly stepped into their arena. Contemplate a neophyte seeking employment. If the interviewer frames them as youthful and lacking experience, the applicant may feel compelled to dedicate the entirety of the interview to disproving this imposed narrative. Or consider an individual branded as a toxic influence, and suddenly every subsequent action is filtered through this deleterious lens. The peril lies in acquiescing to these externally imposed frames. When we embrace another's frame, we relinquish our autonomy. We cease to be the architect of our own lived experience and instead become a character within the narrative of another. This is the very heart of the frame game, discerning when a frame is being subtly insinuated and understanding that you are not beholden to its dictates. It is about recognizing the dynamics of the game for what they are and deliberately choosing your own strategic maneuvers. Why does this profound understanding hold such pivotal importance? Because the mastery of frames is the veritable key to unlocking your intrinsic power and reasserting command over your emotional landscape. How often have you found yourself succumbing to agitation, anger, or anxiety in the crucible of a social encounter? It is highly probable that you were ensnared within another's frame. When you are ensnared in the reactive posture to a negative frame, your composure falters, and your capacity for lucid thought evaporates. Yet, with a profound understanding of frames, you can maintain your equilibrium. You can opt out of their narrative, a strategy I refer to as giving them nothing. This is not an invitation to rudeness. Rather, it is a refusal to permit their frame to dictate your response or your emotional state. And its utility extends far beyond mere defense. Comprehending frames empowers you to achieve your desired outcomes. If an individual frames a situation as insurmountable, you possess the agency to reframe it as a formidable challenge. If a perceived deficiency is highlighted, you can artfully reframe it as a distinctive strength. Herein lies the true brilliance of social alchemy. It is the art of transforming negative or constricting perceptions, both internal and external, into something inherently positive and empowering. It is the alchemy of taking a daunting circumstance and, through the application of discerning framing, transmuting it into a fertile ground for success. At times, this necessitates an inward gaze, an exploration of the latent shadows or deeply ingrained beliefs that may be inadvertently forging limiting frames within ourselves. Throughout the unfolding pages of this book, we shall embark on an immersive exploration of this captivating domain. You will acquire the acumen to detect those invisible frames that others endeavor to impose. You will discover the methodology for forging your own potent master frames that unequivocally serve your highest interests. We shall dissect practical techniques for instantaneously reframing situations, transforming potential confrontations into avenues for advancement. You will begin to grasp the nuanced art of social alchemy, not as a means of subtle manipulation, but as a profound instrument for personal evolution and the cultivation of resilience. The game in the frame game is not one of subterfuge. It is an elucidation of the underlying dynamics of social interaction, played with unwavering awareness and deliberate intention. It is the conscious decision to assume the role of architect of your own social reality, rather than a passive bystander. Prepare yourself to perceive the world and your interactions within its vast expanse through an entirely novel lens. This marks the auspicious commencement of your odyssey into the mastery of social alchemy. Chapter 1. Understanding Frames in Social Interactions. 1. What are social frames? Imagine peering through a window. The vista beyond the garden, the street, the sky exists in tangible reality, yet the glass itself subtly alters perception. A pristine pane offers an unvarnished view. A smudged surface blurs the edges, rendering all indistinct. A tinted pane might imbue the sky with an alien hue. A warped pane could twist the trees into a wavering spectacle. Social frames operate with a similar, albeit invisible, mechanism. They are the inherent lenses through which we apprehend the world, the perspectives that sculpt our understanding of unfolding events. These are the foundational beliefs, unspoken assumptions, and ingrained interpretations that color our social tapestry. Every facet of our interpersonal experience, the words spoken, the gestures made, the perceived intentions, is filtered through these pervasive frames. Consider this. When encountering a new individual, you don't merely perceive a person. You observe them through a specific lens. Perhaps you adopt a benevolent stranger perspective, predisposed to warmth and openness. Conversely, you might engage a wary observer's stance, primed for caution. The identical person can manifest in vastly different lights, contingent upon the operative lens. This is the essence of social framing, a constant, ubiquitous phenomenon woven into every exchange, every glance, every shared instant. These frames are not mere figments of individual consciousness. They are perpetually constructed and disseminated, often with an astonishing lack of self-awareness. A simple utterance, such as, "You always seem so quiet," can instantly impose a frame of shyness or reticence. If this imposed frame is internalized, it may precipitate a behavioral shift, even in the absence of prior inclination. You have, in effect, adopted their window pane, now viewing yourself and the circumstances through their subjective lens. This is a critical juncture. By reacting to an externally imposed frame, particularly through defensiveness, a measure of personal agency is surrendered. When met with, "Why are you being so defensive?" and the immediate retort is, "I'm not defensive," the frame of defensiveness has already been accepted. The ensuing interaction is then governed by their rules, viewed through their distorted glass. The insidious nature of these frames lies in our collective unawareness of their presence. We often believe we are perceiving reality with unclouded clarity. In truth, our perception is invariably molded by the pane we employ. This underscores the paramount importance of understanding frames. It is the genesis of the realization that one possesses the agency to select their own pane of perception. Let us explore a common, everyday illustration. Envision yourself at a professional gathering, drawn to an individual who piques your interest. The desire to initiate a connection arises. Scenario: you approach a solitary figure, whose countenance appears somewhat serious. Frame of the accessible professional. You might interpret this individual as a potential ally, someone simply engrossed in thought, and amenable to a cordial overture. Your internal monologue might be, they seem deeply focused, perhaps contemplating something intriguing. A polite introduction is in order. You advance with a welcoming smile, offering, "Hello, I'm your name." That looks like a face of intense concentration, working on something exciting. Frame B, the impenetrable authority. Alternatively, you might perceive them as occupied, significant, and indisposed to interruption. Your internal assessment could be, they appear disinclined to be disturbed. Their agenda is likely filled with weighty matters. I should not intrude. You might then retreat or linger awkwardly, forfeiting a potential opportunity. The individual's actual disposition or intentions may be identical in both instances. What has transformed is your frame, the interpretive filter applied to their posture and expression. Your subsequent action, dictated by your chosen frame, will definitively shape the outcome of this nascent interaction. Embracing frame A could precipitate a rewarding conversation and forge a new professional bond. Adhering to frame B might result in a fleeting regret or an unceremonious departure, leaving the potential unrealized. This leads us to the second fundamental concept. Frames are frequently imposed, often surreptitiously. Reflect on the prevalence of phrases such as, "You're always so late," imposing a frame of unreliability. "You're being too sensitive," framing your emotions as an unwarranted reaction. "That's just how things are." Establishing a frame of immutability for a situation. "You should be grateful for what you have." Characterizing your aspirations as ingratitude. When such statements are uttered, they serve as an attempt to position a specific pane of glass before your eyes, dictating your self-perception or your interpretation of circumstances. Acceptance of their frame leads to internalization. You may begin to concede, perhaps I am perpetually tardy, or it's possible I am overly sensitive. Their interpretation has been permitted to supplant your own reality. This is the locus of diminished personal power and emotional sovereignty. By acquiescing to an imposed frame, you relinquish dominion over your own perception. You are allowing another to define your lived experience. Consider a friend lamenting their professional situation. "This place is a shambles. My boss is utterly incompetent, and the entire team is failing." If you embrace their frame, you might find yourself agreeing, growing frustrated with their superior, and succumbing to a sense of hopelessness regarding their predicament. You are now viewing their workplace through their lens of negativity and disaster. Anxiety for them may surface, or you might even develop an aversion to their boss, despite lacking direct exposure. Your emotional state becomes tethered to their frame. If you resist or reframe, you could respond, "Wow, that sounds incredibly challenging. What are some aspects that are functioning well, or what's one accomplishment you're particularly proud of this week?" This approach does not invalidate their feelings, but gently guides them and yourself toward an alternative perspective, one that illuminates possibilities or strengths rather than solely focusing on deficiencies. The nascent indicators of an imposed frame often manifest as definitive, judgmental, or overly simplistic labels. These occur when a complex situation or a nuanced individual is condensed into a tidy, frequently negative, categorization. For instance, the declaration, "You're just not cut out for this kind of work," imposes a frame of inherent inadequacy. This is not a neutral observation, but an interpretation designed to curtail self-belief. Differentiating between a genuine observation and an attempt at framing can initially prove elusive, but it is a skill honed through practice. A genuine observation is typically more specific, less judgmental, and invites dialogue. For example, "I noticed you seemed a bit quiet in the meeting today," differs markedly from "You're always so quiet," and "never contribute." The former pertains to a singular moment. The latter is a sweeping, disparaging label that defines your entire persona. The crucial distinction lies in the intent and the scope. Does the statement aim to illuminate a specific event, or does it seek to rigidly define your identity in a restrictive manner? The overarching objective of this work, the frame game, is to facilitate a transition from passive reception of these frames to the active construction of your own social reality. It is about recognizing that you possess the power to select your perceptual pane, to cleanse its surface, to adjust its tint, or even to effect a complete replacement. This process, this metamorphosis, is what we term social alchemy. We have already witnessed how a seemingly adverse circumstance can be transformed through reframing into a positive one. Consider a job candidate devoid of prior experience. The negative frame, no experience? They're a blank slate. They lack foundational knowledge. They will likely err frequently and require constant oversight. This frame perceives the absence of experience as a deficit, a liability. The empowering reframe, no experience? This signifies an absence of ingrained bad habits. They represent a fresh canvas, eager to absorb our methodologies, receptive to novel concepts, and brimming with vibrant energy. It can be shaped precisely to our requirements. This frame views the lack of experience as an advantageous opportunity. Observe how the identical datum, no experience, can be interpreted through two diametrically opposed lenses. The initial frame engenders hesitation and doubt. The subsequent frame fosters enthusiasm and potential. The outcome of the interview, and indeed the applicant's trajectory within the organization, can hinge entirely on the frame adopted by the interviewer or the applicant themselves. This capacity for reframing is not an endorsement of denial or excessive optimism. It is an acknowledgement that reality is often subjective, and our interpretation of it wields significant influence. By consciously choosing to reframe, you can cultivate emotional detachment from negative situations. Rather than feeling personally assailed or overwhelmed by a challenging interaction, you can step back and perceive it as a framing challenge. This disengagement prevents emotional entrenchment within another's negative perspective. Frames are, in essence, instruments of influence and control. They are the subtle, often concealed, mechanisms by which individuals endeavor to shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions. When someone attempts to frame you, they are seeking to direct the discourse, to establish the parameters of engagement, and, ultimately, to secure an advantage. This constitutes the social alchemy that transpires in daily life, the subtle art of transforming one interpretation into another, frequently for personal benefit. The individual adept at establishing or shifting the frame within a social dynamic often assumes the mantle of leadership. They can steer the conversation toward their advantage, mold others' perceptions of them, and guide outcomes in their favor. Conversely, when ensnared within another's frame, you are relegated to a reactive stance, compelled to defend and operate within their established parameters. Control and consequently personal power has been ceded. Therefore, the next time you find yourself in a social context, pause and reflect. Inquire, through what lens am I currently observing? Is this my frame, or does it originate elsewhere? Am I perceiving the situation objectively, or as someone else wishes me to? Recognizing these frames is not an invitation to cynicism or pervasive suspicion. It is an exercise in heightened awareness, a pursuit of clarity, and a reclamation of personal agency. It is about comprehending the fundamental architecture of social interaction to navigate it with assurance and purpose. This awareness is the initial, indispensable stride toward mastering the art of social alchemy. 2. The power of reframing. Imagine a conjurer of profound skill. Their art transcends the mere flourish of a wand, the vanishing of an object into thin air. Instead, they possess an intimate understanding of the audience's expectations, the very fabric of their belief. Then, with an almost imperceptible gesture, a word chosen with exquisite precision, they subtly alter perception. Suddenly, the impossible bends to their will. This, in essence, is reframing, your own potent brand of social sorcery. We have explored how social exchanges are akin to intricate games of perception, where a multitude of frames are perpetually erected. A frame is nothing more than a vantage point, a particular way of apprehending something. Consider it analogous to donning tinted spectacles. If you choose red lenses, the world assumes a subtly altered hue, does it not? Social frames function similarly for our minds, shaping our self-image, our perception of others, and the very situations we inhabit. At times, others endeavor to impose their lenses upon us. They might seek to steer our perception of a scenario to their advantage, perhaps diminishing us, invalidating us, or burdening us with guilt. This is precisely where reframing emerges, not merely as a defensive posture, but as a formidable instrument for reclaiming agency. Reframing, your personal aegis and blade. Let us dissect the mechanics of reframing, its dual capacity as both shield and sword. As an aegis, reframing offers your ultimate bulwark against another's negative or manipulative framing. Picture this: someone declares, "You are perpetually tardy. You are utterly unreliable." If your immediate impulse is to defend yourself with a retort like, "No, I'm not. I was only late that one time," you have already conceded the contest. Because you have implicitly embraced their frame, you are now engaged in an argument within their definition of you as unreliable. But what if you were to reframe it? Instead of defending the label of unreliable, you could pivot your perspective. You might contemplate, "Very well, they perceive me as unreliable. Yet, I am aware that I am striving to manage a multitude of responsibilities at present. My intention is never to be late. Life simply presents unforeseen obstacles." You have not validated their accusation. You have merely acknowledged their perception and subsequently selected a more empowering lens through which to view yourself. You are not asserting their incorrectness, you are simply choosing your reality. This is akin to stating that is one interpretation, but consider this alternative. It disarms their accusation because you are no longer operating by their dictates. You have transcended their frame and are now examining the situation from a distinct vantage point, one that affords you greater influence and less emotional turmoil. As a blade, reframing represents your proactive strategy for sculpting a situation to your advantage. It entails selecting the perspective that best serves your interests before another can impose theirs. Consider a job interview. You may possess limited experience in a particular domain. The frame an interviewer might be inclined to impose is one of inexperience or lack of qualification. However, you can reframe this. You can present yourself as a tabula rasa, eager to absorb knowledge and adaptable to the company's specific needs, or as an individual possessing fresh insights unburdened by entrenched methodologies. You are not fabricating falsehoods, you are illuminating distinct facets of the same reality. You are choosing the frame that positions you as an invaluable asset, rather than a potential liability. This is about steering the discourse, about establishing the tone and narrative from the outset. The art of shifting perspective. Mastering reframing. So, how does one actually execute this reframing? It is a skill, and like all skills, it necessitates diligent practice. Several pivotal steps are involved. 1. Identify the present frame. The very initial step involves discerning the frame that is being presented or that you are currently operating within. What is the underlying message? What is the implicit assumption? Is it positive, negative, or neutral? If someone criticizes your idea, their frame might be, "This idea is fundamentally flawed." If you find yourself overwhelmed by a task, your frame might be, "This is an insurmountable challenge for me." It is imperative to be cognizant of the lens you are employing or the lens being directed at you. 2. Discover an alternative lens. Once the existing frame is recognized, the subsequent step is to seek out an alternative. This is where your creativity and your capacity for understanding diverse perspectives come into play. Pose these questions to yourself. Is there another way to interpret this situation? What positive aspect, however minuscule, can be identified? What is the most neutral interpretation possible? How would someone radiating confidence in this scenario approach it? What is the inherent lesson to be gleaned rather than the perceived failure? For instance, if you are ensnared in traffic and your frame is, "This is an egregious waste of my time. I will be late and utterly stressed," you possess the power to reframe it. Perhaps the new frame becomes, "This presents an unexpected interlude of tranquility. I can utilize this time to immerse myself in a podcast I enjoy, or simply to breathe and decompress before reaching my destination." You are not denying the existence of the traffic. but rather altering its significance and its emotional resonance. 3. Communicate your new frame when strategically advantageous. On occasion, you will engage in reframing internally, solely for the cultivation of your inner peace. This is profoundly impactful for emotional regulation. At other times, you may elect to subtly or overtly introduce your revised frame to others. This is where you can influence the social dynamic. You are not always compelled to announce, "I am now reframing this." More often than not, it is conveyed through your response. If someone declares, "This project is an unmitigated disaster," rather than concurring or engaging in contention, you might respond, "It is undeniably a formidable undertaking, but I view it as an exceptional opportunity for us to innovate and devise novel solutions." You have acknowledged the difficulty their frame while introducing your more empowering perspective. Your reframing for emotional equilibrium and fortifying resilience. This is where reframing truly distinguishes itself as a potent instrument of social alchemy. Our emotional states are intrinsically linked to the frames we adopt. If your frame is, "I am under direct attack," you will likely experience fear or anger. However, if you can shift that frame to, "This individual is attempting to elicit a reaction, and I possess that power to choose my response," you can cultivate a sense of calm and control. Consider the impact of criticism. It can be deeply wounding. The prevailing frame might be, "I am fundamentally inadequate." This frame invariably leads to feelings of shame, despondency, or defensiveness. But what if you were to reframe it? You could perceive the criticism as constructive feedback that can facilitate my improvement, or reflection of the other person's own inherent insecurities, or even evidence that I am engaged in endeavors significant enough to attract attention. Each of these reframes fundamentally alters the emotional repercussions. The sting diminishes, and you emerge with a greater sense of resilience. You learn that situations are not inherently imbued with positivity or negativity. It is the meaning we ascribe to them, through our frames, that orchestrates our emotional experience. This underscores the profound importance of comprehending framing. It is not about negating reality, but rather about consciously selecting which facet of reality to focus upon and how to interpret it. This deliberate choice bestows upon you immense dominion over your internal emotional landscape and your capacity to surmount adversity. The self-amusement reframing tactic, discovering levity within the frame. Now, let us delve into one of the most potent, and indeed, most enjoyable methods of reframing, self-amusement. This involves taking a negative or challenging frame and transforming it into something that evokes humor or lightheartedness. It represents social alchemy at its zenith, as it simultaneously disarms the situation and safeguards your ego. Envision someone attempting to belittle or diminish you. Their frame is likely predicated on the notion, "I am superior and you are inferior." Should you react with anger or defensiveness, you are merely playing their game. However, if you can perceive the humor inherent in their attempt, you have already achieved victory. You might inwardly muse, "Remarkable, they are expending such considerable energy in their endeavor to make me feel insignificant." It is almost endearing, in a peculiar fashion. Or, if someone is exhibiting excessive criticism, you might suppress a chuckle and think, "They are remarkably fervent about this, aren't they?" It's as if they are directing a solo theatrical performance in which I am cast as the antagonist. This is not about sarcastic mockery, though that can be a stratagem in itself, albeit a more perilous one. It is about recognizing the inherent absurdity or the exaggerated nature of their frame from your own internal vantage point. It creates a crucial distance. It allows you to perceive their manipulative gambit without becoming ensnared in the emotional drama. It is a powerful means of preserving your inner equilibrium. You are not merely resisting their frame, you are transmuting its energy into something that serves you. It is about acknowledging the game being played and choosing to be entertained by it, rather than becoming its victim. Practical reframing. From mundane moments to monumental challenges, let us observe how this manifests in tangible scenarios. Addressing criticism. Your supervisor identifies an error in your report. Imposed frame, "You are incompetent." Reframe internal. "This is a valuable learning opportunity. I can rectify this and enhance my performance in the future." Reframe communicated. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I will ensure it is corrected and exercise greater diligence with this detail moving forward. Navigating unsolicited counsel. A relative advises you ought to be pursuing X rather than Y. Imposed frame, you are making imprudent decisions. Reframe internal. Their intentions are benevolent, but they lack a comprehensive understanding of my life's trajectory. My path is uniquely my own. Reframe communicated with tact. I value your concern. I am currently exploring several avenues, but I will certainly bear your suggestion in mind. Mediating minor disagreements. A friend expresses displeasure because you neglected to return their call. Imposed frame, you are indifferent to me. Reframe internal. I was overwhelmed and genuinely forgot. My affection for them is not contingent upon every single communication. Reframe communicated. Oh dear, I am terribly sorry. My mind has been quite preoccupied this week. I will call you back immediately and we can have a proper conversation. Professional context job interview. You were questioned about a hiatus in your employment history. Imposed frame. You lack reliability or possess a propensity for idleness. Reframe communicated. That period was dedicated to personal enrichment, providing care for a family member pursuing a passion project. It imparted valuable skills such as time management, resilience, dedication, which I am confident will prove highly advantageous in this role. Interpersonal dynamics relationship. Your partner is experiencing a bout of insecurity. Imposed frame. Your affection for me is insufficient. Reframe internal. They are presently feeling vulnerable. My role is to offer reassurance, not to adopt a defensive stance. Reframe communicated. I can discern your present uncertainty. Allow me to reiterate the profound significance you hold for me and the reasons for my love. What actions can I take to help you feel more secure at this moment? The mental metamorphosis. From passive recipient to active architect. What specific cognitive shifts are requisite to transition from being a casualty of an imposed frame to becoming an active reframer? It is an evolution from passive reception to active creation. Primarily, it entails awareness. You must cultivate the realization that your thoughts and emotions are not invariably direct responses to objective reality, but rather interpretations filtered through a particular frame. This necessitates cultivating a habit of pausing before reacting. Inquire of yourself, under what frame am I currently operating? Secondly, it involves detachment. You must establish a degree of separation. 3. Managing imposed frames. Social interactions can sometimes feel like a wrestling match where the rules keep shifting and the architect of those rules remains an enigma. We often find ourselves ensnared by another's perspective, their frame thrust upon us. This might be a friend who perpetually casts you as the dependable pillar, a supervisor who dismisses your innovations as risky, or even a stranger who renders judgment based on a fleeting glance. These are imposed frames, akin to lenses someone else places before your eyes, compelling you to perceive the world, or yourself, through their predetermined vista. The liberating truth is that you are not beholden to wear these lenses if they distort your own vision. Mastering the art of navigating these imposed frames is a profound step towards social alchemy. Your most potent defense against an imposed frame is the simple act of recognition. Cultivate a sixth sense for when your perception is being subtly steered. How do you detect these frames? They often betray themselves through distinct cues. Listen for language that labels you or a situation with unyielding finality, especially when it chafes against your reality or feels constricting. Phrases like, "you always do this," or "that's just how you are classic indicators of frame setting. Observe the emotional undertones as well. Sometimes an imposed frame carries a veiled or not so veiled judgment, a ripple of disappointment, or an expectation that weighs heavily. A colleague might remark, with a sigh, "Well, you're usually so organized," when you are merely enduring an off day. They are not merely stating a fact. They are superimposing a frame of your typical self onto your present state, rendering your current deviation from the norm a perceived failing. The very fabric of a situation can also signal an imposed frame. If a conversation leaves you feeling perpetually misunderstood, or if your contributions are consistently diminished or distorted, it is a strong indication that the other party is operating within a frame that obstructs your viewpoint. It is as if they are observing a masterpiece through a stained glass window. The colors and contours are warped, and they insist this distorted vision is the painting's true likeness. The crucial insight here is to perceive the frame without succumbing to the urge to shatter the window. The objective is not to win a debate about the frame's validity, but to acknowledge its presence. The mere internal acknowledgement, that's a frame they're attempting to impose, is a powerful act of self-awareness. It creates a minuscule chasm between you and their imposed perspective. Herein lies a common pitfall. When confronted with an imposed frame, our primal instinct is to defend ourselves. We yearn to correct the misperception, to exclaim, "No, that's not accurate," or "You've entirely misunderstood." This is a critical misstep. By engaging with the premise of an imposed frame, even with impeccable accuracy, you implicitly validate its existence. Imagine someone pointing to a sapphire automobile and adamantly declaring it crimson. If you immediately launch into an elaborate discourse on the spectrum of automotive hues and your own color discernment, you have already conceded that the car's color is a legitimate point of contention. You have surrendered the power to dictate the agenda. This defensive posture ensnares you within their narrative, their frame. It is akin to being drawn into a vortex. The more you endeavor to explain yourself within their established parameters, the deeper you are pulled, and the more leverage you grant them. They desired a discussion about the car's color, and you are now engaged in that very conversation, employing their terminology. This is precisely the outcome sought by those who aim to control or manipulate a situation. They have set the stage, and by defending, you agree to play your assigned role in their drama. Even a vehement denial such as, "I am not lazy," still orbits the concept of laziness as the central concern. The frame of laziness has been imposed, and your denial, however understandable, still lends it oxygen. This is where a seemingly simple yet profoundly effective strategy emerges, the art of giving nothing. This is not an exercise in rudeness or confrontation. It is about becoming strategically uninteresting to the individual imposing the frame. You deny them the emotional or intellectual sustenance they crave. Consider it this way: if someone attempts to sell you something you do not desire, and you consistently offer a polite no thank you and walk away, they will eventually cease their efforts. They will recognize you as an unpromising prospect. Giving nothing is the social analog. It involves maintaining such a tranquil, factual demeanor, so devoid of the emotional resonance the other person anticipates, that they simply lose interest. How does this manifest in practice? In verbal exchanges, it translates to concise, factual responses. If someone seeks to provoke a debate about your intentions, rather than elaborating on your complex motivations, offer a simple, "That's not how I perceived it," or "My focus was on X." There is no embellishment, no justification, merely a neutral statement that sidesteps their negative frame. Emotionally, it requires maintaining an unruffled composure. If someone is attempting to instill guilt or anger, your absence of visible frustration or distress acts as a potent disruptor. Your expression remains placid, your breathing steady. You deny them the satisfaction of witnessing your discomposure. This strategy proves particularly potent when engaging with individuals who thrive on drama or conflict. They impose a frame of accusation or criticism because they are seeking a reaction, a confrontation, or an opportunity to assert their perceived superiority. By giving nothing, you starve them of the desired response. You become an unappealing target. It mirrors the approach of a customer service representative trained to remain courteous and factual, even when faced with an irate customer. The customer might be imposing a frame of incompetent company, but the representative, by offering nothing beyond a calm, professional reply, prevents the interaction from devolving into a personal skirmish. They do not engage with the anger. They address the core issue factually. This preserves their emotional equilibrium and often de-escalates the situation more effectively than an argument. However, mere deflection or withholding can sometimes feel incomplete. This is where the transformative power of reframing truly shines, elevating a defensive posture to one of active empowerment. Reframing is the social alchemist's most cherished instrument. It involves taking the negative or restrictive frame that has been imposed and transmuting it into something neutral, positive, or even humorous, all while preserving your composure and subtly shifting the dynamic in your favor. This is not an aggressive counterattack, it is a nuanced, skillful redirection. Consider a prevalent imposed frame, being labeled as inexperienced. If a manager states, "You're new to this, so you might not grasp the intricacies," the frame being imposed is one of your inadequacy due to a lack of experience. Instead of defending your intellect or knowledge, you can reframe it. You might respond with a confident smile, "That's true, I am new to this specific role, which means I bring a fresh perspective and am eager to learn all the intricacies from the ground up. I'm excited to dive in." You have acknowledged the newness, but reframed it from a deficit into an asset of fresh perspective and eagerness. You have transformed their frame into something valuable. Another instance, you were told you were too direct in your communication. This frame suggests you are abrasive or insensitive. A skillful reframe might be, "I appreciate you pointing that out. My intention is always to be efficient and clear, so I can communicate my ideas effectively. I will be mindful of how that comes across." Here, too direct is reframed as efficient and clear, while still acknowledging the feedback in a way that demonstrates thoughtfulness. You are not denying their perception, but you are offering a more empowering interpretation of your behavior. This is social alchemy in action, transmuting the lead of a negative frame into the gold of a positive outcome. The key is to execute this with a sense of calm confidence, not defensiveness. In our hyper-connected era, we also encounter imposed frames through technology, particularly social media. Algorithms curate our news feeds, presenting a specific, often biased, lens through which we view the world. This represents a vast, continuous imposition of frames upon our perception of reality. Similarly, online interactions can rapidly devolve into scenarios where individuals attempt to impose frames of judgment or criticism. In these contexts, the strategies we have discussed are paramount, but we can also leverage external tools to help manage the emotional toll. Consider the utility of AI, such as that which assists in drafting emails or analyzing text. If you receive a message that feels laden with an imposed negative frame, you can employ AI as a buffer. You can ask it to help you formulate a neutral, factual response, or even to dissect the message for its underlying frame and suggest reframing options. This is not about relinquishing your cognitive autonomy, but rather about utilizing a sophisticated tool to safeguard your mental and emotional resources. It allows you to engage with the situation from a more detached, strategic vantage point rather than being immediately swept into the emotional maelstrom. For example, if you receive a critical email that imposes a frame of your incompetence, you could task an AI with helping you draft a response that addresses the points factually and professionally without succumbing to defensiveness or emotion. This enables you to manage the imposed frame externally, preserving your internal equilibrium. So, what are the most common tells or indicators that a frame is being imposed rather than organically emerging from the interaction? Look for a few key signs. Firstly, the frame often feels tenacious and resistant to dislodgement, even in the face of contrary evidence. It is akin to a label someone is attempting to permanently affix to you or a situation. Secondly, there is frequently a palpable absence of genuine curiosity or openness from the individual imposing the frame. They are not seeking to comprehend your perspective. They are endeavoring to fit you into their own. Thirdly, imposed frames frequently carry an emotional charge that seems disproportionate to the circumstances. A minor oversight might be framed as a catastrophic failure, for instance, because the imposer desires to elicit a specific emotional response. Finally, pay close attention to the power dynamic. Imposed frames are often wielded by those who perceive themselves as possessing less direct authority, and they employ frames to exert influence or control. How does the act of defending against an imposed frame, even with factual accuracy, inherently cede power to the person imposing it? It hinges on validation. When you defend the premise of their frame, you are implicitly stating, "The subject you have chosen to discuss is valid, and I must address it on your terms. This grants them dominion over the narrative. They have successfully drawn you into their chosen reality. Imagine a child weeping because they have dropped their ice cream. If the parent's frame is you are clumsy and careless, and the child cries, "No, I'm not. It slipped," they have accepted the frame of clumsiness as the central issue. The parent has triumphed in the framing battle because the child is now defending against that specific accusation rather than perhaps reframing it as an accident or expressing sorrow over the lost treat. The authority to define the situation has been relinquished. In what specific types of social situations is the strategy of giving nothing most effective, and when might it prove counterproductive? Giving nothing is exceptionally effective in scenarios where the other person is actively seeking a potent emotional reaction, anger, frustration, defensiveness, or even validation of their own negative sentiments. This encompasses interactions with online trolls, excessively critical colleagues, or individuals who derive pleasure from manufacturing conflict. It is also advantageous when you simply lack the energy or inclination for an extended debate, or when the other person's frame is so outlandish that engaging with it would be a futile expenditure of your time. However, it can be counterproductive in situations demanding genuine collaboration or mutual understanding. If you are engaged in a team project and a colleague imposes a frame of your lack of commitment, simply withholding engagement might lead to them escalating their concerns to management, thereby impacting your reputation. In such instances, a brief, factual clarification or a gentle reframe might be more appropriate than complete disengagement. It is a matter of careful assessment. 4. Using AI to resist frames. The modern world thrums with an incessant, unseen current of influence. We navigate a vast ocean of opinions, expectations, and subtle pressures, each seeking to mold our perception of ourselves, others, and the very circumstances we inhabit. These are the frames we have explored, the lenses through which reality is filtered. For far too long, many of us have been passive spectators, allowing others to dictate the frames we adopt. But what if we could equip ourselves with novel instruments, tools that enable us to discern these frames with greater clarity and, dare I suggest, even construct our own defenses against those we find unwelcome? This is where the marvel of our era, artificial intelligence, makes its entrance onto the stage of social alchemy. While it may sound akin to science fiction, the reality is far more pragmatic and, I believe, profoundly empowering. Conceive of AI not as a replacement for your own keen intellect and intuitive spirit, but rather as a sophisticated aid, a digital confederate in the age-old game of social perception. Let us commence with a common, and frankly, disagreeable scenario. You receive an email, a text, or a message that simply feels amiss. It is laden with passive aggression, veiled critiques, or an attempt to induce guilt. Your immediate impulse might be to retaliate with an equally charged reply, to defend yourself, to plunge headlong into the emotional fray. But that is precisely where the sender desires you to be. They have cast their frame, and your emotional response serves as the anchor that drags you squarely into its confines. This is where AI can function as your initial bulwark, a sort of emotional firewall. Envision yourself contending with a particularly difficult former partner, a demanding supervisor, or even a relentless online provocateur. Instead of perusing that venomous missive and feeling your stomach clench, you can forward it, or paste it, into a program such as ChatGPT. You can solicit it to summarize the message or even more effectively to analyze it for you. The AI, unburdened by human emotions, can distill the core points, divest them of their emotional baggage, and present you with a neutral, factual synopsis. Consider this: your ex dispatches a lengthy email, replete with accusations and demands concerning shared responsibilities. Your visceral reaction is to feel defensive, wounded, and irate. You commence drafting a fiery rejoinder. But before you transmit it, you feed the email to your AI assistant. It returns a summary. The sender is expressing dissatisfaction regarding outstanding bills and requesting a plan for their payment. They also express concern about perceived delays in your communication. Suddenly, the emotional tempest begins to abate. You perceive the underlying request, not the torrent of accusations. This simple act of delegation allows you to withdraw from the immediate emotional impact to eschew being instantly ensnared by their chosen frame of you or a negligent and uncaring individual. You can then formulate a response from a position of calm strategy rather than reactive emotion. This is not about evading accountability, it is about responding to the substance of the message, not the emotional warfare it is engineered to provoke. This function of AI as an emotional buffer is immeasurably valuable. It affords you respite. It permits you to process information without being immediately overwhelmed by the emotional weight others endeavor to affix to it. You can then elect when and how to engage, rather than being compelled into an immediate, reactive posture dictated by another's framing. Beyond merely buffering emotions, AI can also serve as an extraordinarily insightful frame analyzer. We have discussed how frames are often subtle, woven into the very fabric of our discourse. Identifying them is the initial, crucial step in resisting them. But let us be candid, at times we are too proximate to a situation, too emotionally invested to discern the manipulative threads with clarity. This is where you can turn to your AI assistant with specific prompts. Imagine you receive an email from a colleague that subtly implies your recent project failure was attributable to your lack of meticulousness, when in reality you were operating with insufficient resources. You feel culpable, but you cannot quite articulate how they are framing it. You can then pose this question to your AI. Analyze this email for manipulative framing tactics. What is the sender endeavoring to make me feel or believe about myself and my work? The AI might respond by identifying gaslighting causing you to doubt your own perception of events or victim-blaming shifting responsibility onto you. It might highlight how phrases such as "it's just unfortunate that" or "perhaps you overlooked" are designed to sow seeds of doubt and self-reproach. This objective analysis is akin to having a seasoned social strategist observing your every move. It does not make the situation vanish, but it illuminates the concealed mechanisms at play. You can now perceive the frame for what it is and attempts to portray you as incompetent, rather than acknowledging the systemic issues that contributed to the outcome. This clear identification is the first step in disarming its potency. This analytical capability extends to all manner of social interactions. Are you dealing with someone who perpetually makes you feel guilty for not extending more assistance to them? Prompt the AI. Is this message an instance of guilt tripping? Are you confronting a debate wherein the other party is distorting your words into something you never intended? Inquire, is the sender employing a strawman argument here? Explain how. This capacity to dissect the framing bestows upon you clarity, a vital commodity when emotions run high and perceptions are being deliberately skewed. Once you have identified the frame, the subsequent logical progression is to counteract it. And here, AI truly excels as a creative collaborator. We have discussed the efficacy of reframing, of presenting an alternative interpretation that shifts the narrative. AI can be an extraordinary brainstorming instrument for this endeavor. Let us posit that you are striving to obtain approval for a novel concept, but the individual to whom you are presenting is entrenched in a frame of "this is too precarious" or "we have always conducted it in this fashion." You can present the situation to your AI and ask, "I need to reframe the notion of risk into an opportunity for innovation. How can I phrase this to render it more appealing?" The AI might suggest focusing on the potential rewards, the competitive advantage it confers, or the lessons gleaned from past risks that prove successful. It can assist you in crafting language that redirects the focus from potential detriments to potential advantages. Recall our discussion regarding the creation of unremarkable or disengaging responses to neutralize manipulative overtures. AI can be a magnificent generator of these. If someone is attempting to elicit an emotional reaction from you, perhaps by posing intrusive personal questions in a professional context, you can ask the AI, "My colleague is inquiring about my weekend plans in a manner that feels intrusive." Generate some polite yet neutral, non-engaging responses that redirect the conversation back to work. The AI might offer phrases such as, "My weekend was tranquil, thank you for asking." Now, concerning that project deadline, or I am focused on finalizing this report today. Did you have any questions about it? These responses are designed to be so bland, so devoid of emotional hooks, that they provide no fodder for the manipulator's fire. They effectively convey, I recognize your attempt to engage me in this manner, but I am not taking the bait. This collaborative reframing process is where the true social alchemy begins to manifest. You are not merely reacting, you are strategically responding. You are employing AI to assist you in discovering the most efficacious verbiage, the most opportune angles, to preserve your own frame and guide the discourse toward a more productive or less taxing outcome. Perhaps one of the most potent, yet frequently overlooked, applications of AI in resisting frames is its role as a practice partner. Social interactions, particularly those involving the navigation of intricate frames, can be daunting. We may rehearse conversations in our minds, but it is not quite equivalent to real-time engagement. AI can provide a secure, non-judgmental space for this practice. You can establish role-playing scenarios. Envision yourself facing a challenging conversation with a client who is prone to making unreasonable demands. You can instruct the AI, let us role-play. You are a demanding client who is dissatisfied with the service I provided, even though I believe I delivered as agreed. I will endeavor to maintain my frame that the service was completed in accordance with the contract and find a resolution that is equitable to both of us. In this simulated environment, you can practice identifying the client's framing attempts. Perhaps they are framing the situation as a complete failure on your part. You can practice your reframing techniques, your neutral responses, and your assertive communication. The AI can respond in ways that mimic human behavior, offering you immediate feedback, albeit within a controlled setting. You can experiment with different approaches, observe what proves effective, and learn from any missteps without real-world repercussions. This kind of rehearsal cultivates confidence and hones your skills, rendering you far more adept at managing analogous situations when they arise in actuality. It is akin to a digital sparring session for your social resilience. Now, it is imperative to address the limitations and ethical considerations that accompany the use of AI in this capacity. This is not a panacea. Excessive reliance on AI could, in fact, impede your own social development. If you consistently delegate the emotional processing or the generation of responses, you may fail to cultivate your own intuition and fortitude. The objective is to utilize AI as an instrument for learning and empowerment, not as a crutch that forestalls your growth. Consider it analogous to learning to ride a bicycle with training wheels. The training wheels are initially beneficial, but you eventually need to remove them to truly master the skill. Furthermore, AI, while advanced, can still misinterpret context. Human communication is extraordinarily nuanced. Sarcasm, humor, cultural allusions, these can occasionally elude an AI's comprehension, leading to misinterpretations or less than ideal suggestions. Privacy is another concern. You should always be cognizant of the information you share with AI platforms, particularly sensitive personal details. So, how do you ensure you are employing AI for empowerment rather than becoming beholden to it? The key lies in active engagement. Do not merely accept the AI's output without question. Scrutinize its analysis. Ask yourself, does this analysis hold water? Is this the optimal method for reframing it? What did I glean from this interaction that I can apply in the future? Treat the AI's suggestions as starting points, as inspiration, rather than definitive pronouncements. Utilize its analysis to comprehend the underlying dynamics, and then employ your own judgment and creativity to formulate the final response. The efficacy of AI also varies depending on the situation and the individuals involved. It is likely to be most beneficial in handling written communication or in preparing for structured interactions such as meetings or interviews. It might prove less effective in spontaneous, highly emotional, face-to-face encounters where nonverbal cues are paramount, and when dealing with individuals who are themselves exceptionally adept manipulators. Even AI might struggle to keep pace with their sophisticated framing tactics. Ultimately, the potency of AI in resisting frames resides in its capacity to augment our own capabilities. It furnishes us with speed, analytical prowess, and creative input that can be difficult to access when we are under duress. It permits us to pause, to analyze, and to respond strategically rather than react impulsively. It is a means of leveling the playing field, of granting us an advantage in the intricate dance of social perception. But as we harness these remarkable technological aids, we must recall that the essence of social alchemy remains within us. AI can assist us in identifying and resisting external frames, but constructing an unshakable internal frame, one that is resilient and authentic, is a journey of personal growth. The digital assistants can offer us formidable strategies, but true mastery stems from integrating these insights, cultivating our own emotional intelligence, and fostering a profound sense of self-awareness. The subsequent step on this path is to investigate how we can forge that inner strength, that personal anchor, that will serve us even when the screens go dark and the digital allies are offline. Chapter 2. Mastering Emotional Control and Authenticity. 1. Staying calm in confrontations. Confrontations. The very word can send a tremor through the soul, can it not? We have all navigated those tempestuous waters, the escalating voices, the accusatory gestures, the suffocating sensation of being trapped. It is effortless to feel the frantic drumming of one's heart, the clammy descent of one's palms, the dizzying whirl of one's thoughts. In such moments, the very ground beneath us seems to liquefy, and our meticulously constructed sense of self feels besieged. Yet, a profound truth exists, one capable of reshaping our entire perspective. The vast majority of confrontations are not, in fact, about the superficial issue at hand. At their profoundest core, they are skirmishes over perception, over dominion in defining reality, in dictating significance, and in asserting one's identity. They are, in essence, battles waged over the very frame through which we perceive the world. When an individual embarks upon a barrage of aggressive interrogation, hurls accusations, or launches personal assaults, what is their true objective? They are endeavoring to compel you into a predetermined frame. Envision it thus. They are presenting a fractured lens, intent on forcing you to view yourself and the unfolding situation through the distorted prism of their own warped perspective. Their ultimate aim is to diminish you, to render you erroneous, or to expose you as inept. They desire your acquiescence to their frame, your willing assumption of the role they have meticulously assigned you, that defensive posture, the guilty confession, the foolish folly. The instant you succumb to an emotional response, be it burgeoning anger, creeping anxiety, or defensive retrenchment, it is an irrefutable signal that you have been ensnared within their frame. You have implicitly accepted their lens, and now you are ensnared in their game, dictated by their rules. Your composure evaporates, and with it, your inherent power. The most potent stratagem for resisting this insidious form of manipulation, for safeguarding your personal sovereignty, lies in a resolute refusal to participate in their game. This is the domain of the principle of giving nothing, a concept that, while deceptively simple, possesses an extraordinary efficacy. It is not a call for incivility or an embrace of absolute silence. Rather, it is the deliberate withholding of the emotional sustenance that the aggressor so desperately craves. Picture a nascent conflagration. If its oxygen supply is severed, its growth is arrested. Your emotional reaction serves as the very oxygen for their aggressive framing. So, what does the practice of giving nothing entail? It manifests as responses characterized by brevity, neutrality, and an inherent lack of allure to one actively seeking conflict. In lieu of defensively countering an accusation such as, "You never listen," a measured and factual rejoinder might be, "I hear you expressing that I do not listen." You are neither conceding nor refuting, you are not succumbing to agitation. You are merely acknowledging their statement without validating the underlying aggression. Consider another scenario. If persistent, nebulous criticism of your work is levied, rather than launching into an exhaustive defense, a simple, "Thank you for your feedback," suffices. This polite acknowledgement offers no purchase for further attack. It is akin to presenting a blank wall rather than a vulnerable target. This is not an endorsement of passivity, it is a testament to strategic acumen. It is the deliberate orchestration of the interaction's energy, ensuring it does not devolve into chaos because you have declined to fuel its escalation. However, the cultivation of equanimity extends beyond mere defensive maneuvers. It can also serve as a potent catalyst for personal evolution. Reflect upon this. When an individual endeavors to impose a negative frame upon you, it is akin to them holding aloft a mirror, albeit one that reflects a distorted image. Instead of recoiling from this warped reflection, what if you were to seize the confrontation as an opportunity to scrutinize your own internal landscape? By maintaining your composure, you create the necessary aperture for observation. You can perceive the aggressive frame for precisely what it is, an attempt at manipulation. And within this act of observation lies the potential for profound learning. Perhaps the accusation, however aggressively delivered, touches upon a genuine insecurity you harbor. Perhaps their attack illuminates a blind spot in your communication style that has hitherto remained unnoticed. This is the crucible where the transformative power of social alchemy truly ignites. When you possess the capacity to withdraw, to remain serene, and to observe both the imposed frame and your own attempted emotional response, you acquire invaluable self-awareness. You become intimately acquainted with your triggers. You comprehend which assaults resonate most profoundly and the underlying reasons for their impact. This is not an exercise in self-recrimination for possessing triggers. It is an endeavor to understand them so that they may be managed. The confrontation, rather than being solely an adverse event, transforms into a diagnostic instrument, facilitating the refinement of your internal architecture. You are no longer a passive vessel for the frames imposed by others. You are actively engaged in self-discovery, which is the foundational step toward becoming the architect of your own social reality. At times, even the practice of giving nothing and diligent observation can feel arduous. The pressure can be overwhelming. This is where another potent, almost whimsical, defense mechanism emerges: self-amusement. When you can unearth a sliver of humor or detachment amidst the inherent absurdity of a situation, it functions as an invisible bulwark. Imagine an individual in the throes of an emotional outburst, spewing outlandish accusations. If you can, internally, step back and perceive the almost theatrical quality of their performance, the predictable cadence of their anger, their power can be significantly diluted. You are not deriding them maliciously, but rather, you are discovering a private source of amusement within the situation itself. This constitutes a fundamental tenet of social alchemy. It is the alchemical process of transforming the base metal of conflict into the precious gold of inner tranquility. By nurturing this sense of self-amusement, you construct a psychological buffer. The aggressive pronouncements and actions lose their potency because you are no longer wholly invested in their emotional drama. You assume the role of an observer, perhaps even a mildly entertained one, witnessing the unfolding spectacle. This is not an act of disrespect toward the other party. It is a vital act of self-preservation for your emotional well-being. It is the recognition that their attempt to commandeer your emotions through aggression is, in its own peculiar way, rather ludicrous. And the discovery of this inner amusement empowers you to maintain your own frame of calm and control, even when the external world is in disarray. Let us delve more deeply into how our emotional reactions serve as indicators that we have capitulated to an aggressor's frame. When a sweeping accusation such as "you are invariably so selfish" is uttered, and you are immediately assailed by a surge of anger and an urgent compulsion to refute their assertion, that is your definitive signal. Your anger is a direct consequence of their framing, which irrevocably labels you as selfish. Your immediate inclination to defend yourself signifies that you have accepted their definition of your character. You are not inquiring, what precisely do they mean by selfish? Or is there a kernel of truth within this, however poorly articulated? Instead, you are reacting to the label itself. Similarly, if someone declares, "You clearly lack understanding," and a disquieting anxiety begins to coil in your stomach, a fear that perhaps you do lack understanding that anxiety is your cue. You have embraced their narrative of your incompetence. The crucial element lies in recognizing these physiological and emotional indicators before they fully exert their dominion. Your accelerated pulse, your flushed countenance, the constriction in your chest, these are not mere random sensations. They are your body's intrinsic alarm system, signaling that your internal framework is being compromised. And what are the active internal cognitive processes requisite for the successful application of giving nothing or the deployment of self-amusement? It transcends a mere attempt to suppress a reaction. It involves the deliberate redirection of your internal discourse and focus. When confronted with an aggressive frame, rather than succumbing to the thought, "Oh no, I am under attack," endeavor to pivot to intriguing. They are attempting to cast me in the role of X. How might I respond with measured neutrality? This conscious recalibration of your thoughts is paramount. In the practice of giving nothing, the internal process might involve the silent repetition of a simple, neutral affirmation, such as remain calm, or observe, or even a focused attention on your respiration. It is about establishing a mental anchor that ensures your grounding. For self-amusement, the internal shift involves seeking out the inherent absurdity. You might contemplate, remarkable, their commitment to this performance is profound, or this resembles a scene from a rather mediocre theatrical production. It is about cultivating a mental distance that permits you to perceive the situation with a degree of detachment, rather than being consumed by its intensity. This, of course, necessitates diligent practice. Like any acquired skill, these mental transitions become progressively more facile with repeated application. By mastering the art of maintaining composure amidst the tempest of confrontation, we not only safeguard our emotional equilibrium, but also lay the essential groundwork for authentic self-expression. This internal steadiness grants us the discernment to recognize when to engage, when to withdraw, and most crucially, how to ensure our responses are genuinely our own, rather than reactions dictated by another's agenda. The subsequent imperative, therefore, is to comprehend how this controlled internal state empowers us to articulate our authentic selves, even when the external world endeavors to impose an alternative narrative. 2. Embracing shadow work. We often perceive our inner landscape as a brightly illuminated chamber, where every facet is laid bare and accounted for. Yet, what if there exist concealed alcoves, dust-laden oubliettes, or even entire chambers we have deliberately sealed shut? These are the fragments of ourselves that we seldom unveil to others and more often than not, deny even to our own consciousness. Within the intricate art of social alchemy, these are known as the shadow. The shadow is not synonymous with malevolence or depravity. It is, quite simply, the repository of traits, emotions, and aspirations we have relegated to the periphery. Perhaps it is a profound apprehension of inadequacy, a fleeting surge of anger deemed unacceptable, an insistent yearning for external approval, or even an unrecognized talent we deem inconsequential. We disavow these aspects because we harbor the conviction that they render us vulnerable, unlovable, or irredeemable. We inter them, hoping for their dissolution. However, they persist. Instead, they commence to orchestrate our existence from the periphery, fabricating unseen directives and expectations that sculpt our perception of the world and ourselves. Consider it through an analogy. Each individual possesses a unique vantage point, a personalized lens through which they interpret reality. This is what we term a frame. Typically, our discourse centers on the frames others impose upon us, how a supervisor might pigeonhole you as a mere functionary, or how a critic might dissect your work as flawed. Yet, the most potent frames are those we construct ourselves, often without conscious volition. And these self-fashioned frames are profoundly shaped by our shadow. Should your shadow harbor a deep-seated dread of rejection, you may unconsciously frame every social encounter as a prelude to repudiation. You enter a gathering and an internal monologue whispers, "They will not embrace me. I shall utter something amiss. I do not belong here." This internal framework then dictates your demeanor. You might retreat to a secluded corner, avert your gaze, or speak sparingly. Paradoxically, this comportment can dissuade others from engaging with you, thereby reinforcing your initial apprehension. You become ensnared by a frame born of your own disowned fear. Similarly, if your shadow encompasses unexpressed ire, you might unconsciously interpret neutral remarks as personal affronts. A colleague states, "That report requires a modicum of additional detail," and your shadow-infused frame translates it as, "They deem me incompetent and incapable of fulfilling my duties." This precipitates a defensive posture, perhaps a sharp retort or a withdrawal, all because your internal frame has distorted a simple request into an accusation. These shadow-driven internal frameworks are the clandestine architects of our emotional responses. They render us susceptible. They are the unseen strings that others, whether by design or accident, can manipulate to compel us into performing to their tune. This is precisely where shadow work enters the discourse. It is not an exercise in dredging through mire or succumbing to despair. It is a deliberate, conscious endeavor to illuminate those veiled recesses of our being. It entails acknowledging those disavowed components, the fears, the insecurities, the desires we have been conditioned to perceive as aberrant, not for condemnation but for comprehension. What is the genesis of this apprehension? From whence did this need for affirmation arise? What purpose did this anger once serve? As we pose these inquiries, we begin to discern that our shadow is not a harbinger of doom. It is, frequently, a misguided guardian, or a part of ourselves desperately seeking recognition due to neglect. By bringing these elements into the light of awareness, we commence to reframe our internal narrative. We can initiate the dismantling of the constricting internal frames that were erected around these concealed aspects. This represents the inaugural, pivotal step in social alchemy, the internal recalibration that fortifies us from the core outward. Let us ponder the analytical query: how do specific shadow aspects, for example fear of inadequacy, unexpressed anger, need for external validation, directly forge limiting internal frames that render individuals susceptible to external social manipulation? Let us dissect this with straightforward illustrations. Fear of inadequacy. If your shadow is replete with sentiments of insufficient worth, your internal frame will likely embody self-doubt. You may incessantly compare yourself to others and invariably fall short. In a social context, this frame renders you vulnerable. Someone might remark, "You are not truly suited for this endeavor, are you?" Ordinarily, you might resist or assert your capabilities. However, with the shadow of inadequacy framing your perception, you might readily concur, thinking, "Indeed, they are correct. I am not adequate." You have acquiesced to their frame because it precisely mirrors your own internal, restrictive framework. You have not defended yourself, you have merely validated your most profound fear. This makes you facilely dismissible or undervalued. Unexpressed anger. Envision your shadow harboring a considerable reservoir of anger that you never acquired the means to express constructively. Your internal frame might be one of perpetual vigilance, constantly scanning for slights or injustices. When someone, perhaps a colleague, offers constructive criticism, your shadow frame interprets it as an assault. The external frame they intended was helpful feedback, but your internal frame contorts it into a personal insult. You may then respond with passive aggression, a sudden outburst, or complete withdrawal. This reaction, impelled by your shadow, renders you appear difficult or unstable, permitting others to frame you as the source of the problem, rather than addressing the core issue. Your untamed anger, fueled by the shadow, becomes a device for others to isolate or discredit you. Need for external validation. If a fundamental component of your shadow is an urgent requirement for others to esteem and endorse you, your internal frame is perpetually engaged in a quest for approval. You might perceive social interactions as trials of your likability. Someone offers a compliment, and your shadow frame seizes upon it, providing a fleeting sense of well-being, yet simultaneously fostering dependency on that external source. Inversely, if an individual appears indifferent or critical, your shadow frame shrieks, "I am insufficient. I must rectify this." This renders you exceedingly vulnerable. One can readily manipulate you by withholding praise or dispensing just enough to perpetuate your pursuit of their approbation. You might consent to unreasonable demands, alter your opinions to align with theirs, or eschew conflict at all costs, all because your internal frame is wired to solicit validation from without, transforming you into a pawn in their stratagem. These shadow-driven internal frames are not mere passive convictions. They are active forces that dictate our emotional responses and, consequently, our navigation of social interactions. They engender a form of unconscious script that unfolds, frequently leading us to outcomes we do not desire. Thus, how does the integration of the shadow culminate in emotional regulation and authenticity? It is a matter of completeness. When we deny or suppress aspects of ourselves, we precipitate an internal schism. An immense proportion of our vitality is expended in maintaining these disavowed components in concealment. This perpetual internal conflict leaves us emotionally depleted and prone to reactivity. We remain perpetually on guard, apprehensive that our shadow will erupt. When we undertake the work of acknowledging and integrating our shadow, we cease to war against ourselves. We accept the presence of these complex sentiments and characteristics. This acceptance does not imply condoning the manifestation of anger or indulging insecurities, but rather understanding their existence. We can articulate, very well, I am experiencing a surge of insecurity at this moment, and I recognize it stems from that old apprehension of inadequacy. Yet, I also acknowledge my capabilities and inherent worth. This self-awareness forms the bedrock of emotional control. Rather than being swept away by an emotion dictated by a shadow aspect, we can observe it. We can comprehend its origins and elect how to respond, rather than being automatically ensnared. This empowers us to react to external frames from a position of measured deliberation, not panic impulse. Authenticity, too, flourishes from this integration. When we conceal facets of ourselves, we cannot be genuinely authentic. We present a meticulously curated version of ourselves, perpetually apprehensive of exposure. However, upon integrating our shadow, we achieve greater wholeness. We can express our emotions, our strengths, and even our vulnerabilities with candor, free from shame. This completeness renders us more genuine, more real. This internal transformation directly translates into enhanced efficacy in external frame battles. When you are not engaged in an internal struggle, you possess substantially more energy and clarity to confront external pressures. You are less likely to be destabilized by an attempt to frame you negatively because your internal frame is robust and self-assured. You can recognize their frame for what it is, an endeavor to influence your perception, and elect whether or not to embrace it rather than automatically absorbing it because it resonates with your own concealed insecurities. This brings us to the practical dimension. How do we, in actuality, undertake this work? One potent methodology involves posing what we might term shadow questions. These are inquiries designed to gently probe the hidden advantages or underlying beliefs associated with our less than ideal behaviors or sentiments. They circumvent our customary defenses by inquiring about seemingly contradictory or uncomfortable aspects of ourselves. Let us examine the analytical question: what is the precise mechanism by which integrating shadow elements leads to enhanced emotional control and authenticity, and how does this internal shift translate into greater power in external frame battles? The mechanism of integration is fundamentally about diminishing internal conflict and reclaiming psychic energy. Envision your psyche as akin to a household. When you have sequestered certain family members, your shadow aspects, in the basement, you expend considerable time and effort ensuring no one hears them, no one sees them, and they cause no disruption. This exacts a substantial toll. You are in a perpetual state of anxiety, constantly attuned to any sounds. Your attention is divided. When you integrate your shadow, it is akin to opening the door to the basement. You invite those family members upstairs. This does not imply they will govern the household. It signifies that you acknowledge their presence. You comprehend their history, their needs, and their idiosyncrasies. Now, rather than expending vast reserves of energy on suppression, you can rechannel that energy. You can utilize it to concentrate on what is paramount, to engage with the world, and to manage your emotions with conscious intent. Enhanced emotional control. This arises from comprehension. When a shadow-born fear of inadequacy surfaces, you do not merely experience a wave of panic. You recognize it. Ah, there is that old fear again. It is attempting to inform me that I am insufficient. Because you have integrated this aspect, you can acknowledge the feeling without being subjugated by it. You can question yourself, is this fear founded upon the present circumstance, or is it an antiquated narrative? What evidence do I possess that I am capable? This pause, this conscious observation, constitutes emotional control. You are no longer a puppet of the emotion, you are its observer and conductor. Authenticity. This emerges from candor and completeness. When you have integrated your shadow, you are no longer feigning a persona you do not embody. You accept your complexities. You can admit to experiencing anxiety or envy or even a modicum of pride without feeling compelled to conceal or overcompensate. This genuine self-acceptance permits you to present yourself more openly and honestly to the world. You cease to perform a role and begin simply to be. This is the essence of authenticity. Greater power in external frame battles. This is where the internal work directly influences your external reality. When your internal frames are stable and congruent with your integrated self, you become considerably more resistant to manipulation. Let us employ an illustration. Suppose someone endeavors to frame you as being excessively sensitive because you reacted to a harsh remark. Without shadow integration, your shadow fear of being perceived as weak may be triggered. You might become defensive, over-explain your feelings, or even lash out, thereby validating their frame that you are, indeed, too sensitive and reactive. You have lost the frame battle. With shadow integration, you recognize the label too sensitive. You might acknowledge internally, yes, that comment stung. A part of me feels sensitive about it due to past experiences where my feelings were disregarded. However, because you have integrated that part, you do not require external validation or fear their judgment. You can respond calmly, perhaps with a neutral statement such as, "I hear your feedback. I will consider it," or even a direct yet composed assertion, "I felt that comment was unnecessarily harsh." You have not denied your feelings, but you have not permitted them to dictate your response. You have maintained your own frame, one of self-awareness and tranquil assertion, and refused to be confined within their limiting perception. You have employed your 3. Challenging beliefs about struggle. We often harbor a silent conviction that life's most profound accomplishments, and indeed our own intrinsic value, are inextricably bound to the degree of our struggle. It is a subtle undercurrent woven into the tapestry of our narratives, lauded in the cultural zeitgeist, and sometimes, even, solidified by the very fabric of our lived experiences. We witness individuals lauded for conquering immense adversity, and in doing so, we unconsciously internalize the message that hardship is a mark of distinction, a prerequisite for anything truly significant. But what if this is merely a construct, a perspective that inadvertently impedes our access to genuine ease and authentic fulfillment? Consider this. How often have you encountered pronouncements like, "If it comes too easily, it cannot possibly be substantial," or "One must endure suffering for one's art or success"? These are not idle observations, they are potent framing mechanisms. They cast struggle as the protagonist, the archetypal hero's odyssey, the sole conduit to a meaningful conclusion. And when we subscribe to this narrative, a peculiar disquietude arises when circumstances do not feel like a Herculean undertaking. We may even begin to question our own achievements if they were not accompanied by a significant measure of pain and sacrifice. This is the insidious influence of the struggle is essential paradigm, subtly dictating our emotional responses and our perception of our personal trajectory. This deeply embedded belief can become a formidable impediment to our emotional equilibrium and authenticity. If we equate struggle with necessity, then moments of ease can feel unearned, even suspect. We might, on an unconscious level, prolong difficulties, not out of inevitability, but because our internal script demands it. We may shy away from opportunities that appear too straightforward, fearing they lack the gravitas of a hard-won triumph. This perpetuates a cycle where our pursuit is not of our goals themselves, but of the experience of struggle, mistaking it for evidence of our effort and inherent worth. It is akin to a chef who believes the only path to culinary excellence is to incinerate half the ingredients. The eventual dish may be palatable, but the process is gratuitously arduous, and the true essence of flavor is irrevocably lost. The imperative, then, is to scrutinize this deeply entrenched framework. We must inquire, with a spirit of curiosity and openness, what precisely have we absorbed that leads us to believe struggle is not merely unavoidable, but somehow virtuous or indispensable to our success and our sense of self? From whence did this notion originate? Was it imparted by parental figures who prioritized diligence above all else, perhaps using their own hardships as a perpetual exemplar? Was it a product of societal narratives that elevate the underdog who battles relentlessly against insurmountable odds? Or has it become so deeply ingrained that it feels like an objective verity rather than an adopted perspective? Comprehending the genesis of this belief is the initial stride toward its dissolution. It is about recognizing that these narratives, however well-intentioned, are merely frames. They are lenses through which we perceive the world, and when we consciously select a different lens, our reality can undergo a profound transformation. This is not an advocacy for indolence or an outright repudiation of effort. It is about discerning between productive exertion and self-imposed, superfluous suffering. It is about understanding that, at times, the most potent method of achievement lies not in brute force and relentless grinding, but in astute strategy, unclouded intention, and an inherent belief in the possibility of ease. Beyond the conscious conviction that struggle is a prerequisite, there often lies a more concealed stratum, the shadow payoff of struggle. This is where the exploration becomes particularly illuminating and perhaps a touch disquieting. We may, on an unconscious level, derive advantages from our difficulties, even as we ardently wish for their cessation. Consider it thus: if one's identity is forged in the crucible of being the one who always fights, what becomes of that identity when the fighting ceases? Who then are we? The struggle can become an integral component of our self-definition, a means of situating ourselves within the broader context of existence. These shadow payoffs can manifest in a myriad of ways. For some, it is the sense of validation they glean when others acknowledge their hardship. "Oh, you have endured so much," people remark, and a segment of us craves that sympathy, that recognition of our resilience. It is a form of external approbation that can feel profoundly potent, particularly if internal self-worth is deficient. The struggle, in this instance, becomes a means of earning that approval, a currency of suffering. For others, the shadow payoff may serve as a form of protection. If we are convinced that success must be exceedingly arduous, then any failure can be attributed not to a deficit in our capabilities, but to the overwhelming nature of the struggle. It is a stratagem to evade the more daunting prospect that we might exert ourselves to our utmost, achieve something with relative ease, and then confront the realization that the true challenge lies not in attainment, but in preservation, or in navigating the uncharted territory that accompanies a different order of success. The struggle, in this light, becomes a comfortable, familiar burden, a means of sidestepping the potentially more intimidating landscape of unearned ease or effortless achievement. It is akin to standing at the precipice of a magnificent, boundless ocean, yet fearing to plunge in, thus remaining on the shore, lamenting the grit in one's shoes. The sand is an annoyance, but it is known. The ocean is vast and potentially overwhelming. This is where the concept of a mental chess game assumes paramount importance. We are not passive recipients of our beliefs. We are active strategists within our own internal dominion. To unearth these shadow payoffs, we must pose ourselves pointed shadow questions. These are inquiries designed to probe the unacknowledged recesses of our being, the aspects that may be actively resisting the very ease we profess to desire. Questions such as, why do I appear to cherish my suffering? Or what am I afraid of forfeiting if things were to become effortless? When we ask, why do I like to suffer? It is not an indictment, but an invitation to exploration. It is an acknowledgement that a hidden solace, a clandestine advantage, a shadow payoff may be unconsciously clung to. Perhaps it is the attention garnered, the feeling of strength derived from endurance, or even a sense of purpose found in surmounting obstacles. If we are candid, we may discover that a part of us genuinely relies on this struggle for its definition, its validation, or its perceived significance. Similarly, when contemplating financial prosperity, asking, "What does being financially secure threaten?" can yield profound insights. If our lives have consistently been framed as a perpetual battle to make ends meet, then sudden financial ease might challenge our identity as a fighter, or our ingrained belief that life is inherently fraught with difficulty. It could disrupt relationships that were predicated on a shared narrative of scarcity. It can be unsettling to confront the notion that our deepest aspirations might be in opposition to our most deeply held convictions. The ultimate objective within this mental chess game is not the eradication of all effort, but a fundamental reframing of struggle itself. We must shift our focus from the conviction that success must be arduous to the belief that easy success is not only attainable but desirable. This does not imply an absence of challenges. Life will invariably present obstacles. The crucial distinction lies in our internal framing. Instead of perceiving every challenge as an affirmation of our correct path of suffering, we can view it as an opportunity to deploy our skills, our intellect, and our energy with efficacy, aiming for the most elegant and effective resolution, rather than the most laborious. Valuing easy success is not an endorsement of idleness, it is an emblem of sagacity. It is the recognition that our emotional energy is a finite and precious resource. When ensnared by the struggle is necessary frame, a substantial portion of this energy is consumed by internal resistance, self-doubt, and the sheer exertion of battling our own limiting beliefs. By reframing our objective toward ease and efficiency, we liberate that energy. It can then be channeled into creativity, innovation, genuine connection, and the pursuit of our goals with a sense of flow and authentic delight rather than dread and exhaustion. This reframing is a potent act of social alchemy. It is the transmutation of the lead of struggle is good into the gold of effectiveness and ease are valuable. It signifies a conscious decision to embrace the belief that we are capable of achieving great things without gratuitous pain. It entails celebrating those moments when things align effortlessly, when solutions emerge readily, when progress feels natural. It means understanding that our worth is not quantified by the intensity of our suffering, but by the quality of our contribution, the depth of our connection, and the authenticity of our being. As we begin to challenge these deeply ingrained beliefs surrounding struggle, we unlock a profound stratum of emotional liberation. We are no longer tethered to the notion that suffering is a prerequisite for worthiness or success. This freedom empowers us to stand more resolutely in our authentic selves, unburdened by the imperative to prove our value. Through pain, we can commence operating from a locus of genuine desire rather than compulsive exertion. This paradigm shift extends beyond personal comfort. It engenders ripple effects. When we are not ensnared by the draining cycle of perceived struggle, we become more present, more resilient, and more adept at navigating life's inevitable trials with grace and clarity. We can engage with the world not from a posture of defense or obligation, but from a position of empowered choice. The subsequent phase in mastering our social alchemy involves taking this newfound clarity and control and applying it to our interactions with the external world, recognizing that just as we can reframe our internal beliefs, we can also influence and navigate the frames that others endeavor to impose upon us. 4. Achieving easy success. Success, we are frequently told, is a crucible, a testament to unyielding grit and relentless struggle. We imbibe the notion that the sweat equity poured directly correlates to the desert of the reward. But what if this ubiquitous narrative, this widely embraced paradigm, is in fact a subtle impediment? What if the concept of effortless success is not an ethereal myth, but a more streamlined, a more genuine conduit to our aspirations? This is precisely where our perspective must pivot, where we begin to apprehend that triumph need not be an arduous ascent. It can manifest as a fluid evolution, a natural consequence of harmonizing our internal landscape with our external endeavors. Let us be unequivocally clear, effortless success does not connote a triumph devoid of exertion, nor one unearned. It is not an endorsement of indolence or a passive expectation of serendipity. Rather, it is a profound comprehension that the perception of effort, the internal friction we engineer, frequently constitutes the most formidable barrier. When we achieve mastery over our internal frameworks, the very lenses through which we survey our objectives and the mechanisms of their attainment, the path unfurls with remarkable clarity. We cease our internal warfare, and it is then that circumstances begin to feel, and indeed become, more facile. Consider this analogy. Attempting to swim upstream against a formidable current is an exhausting undertaking. Yet, if one can discern the optimal angle, leverage the current to one's advantage, or even discover a more placid channel, the journey becomes demonstrably less taxing. This is the very essence of achieving success with greater facility, by mastering the social framing of the effort itself. It is about working with superior intelligence, not merely with increased exertion, by governing our perception of the work and its intrinsic value. This postulate directly interfaces with the bedrock of emotional superintendence. When we find ourselves assailed by overwhelm, anxiety, or self-doubt, success inevitably assumes an appearance of Herculean difficulty, even impossibility. These deleterious emotional states fabricate an internal frame that distorts our perception of reality, rendering each step akin to wading through viscous mire. Conversely, when we command our emotions, when we approach our objectives with an aura of tranquil assurance and unfeigned enthusiasm, the challenges diminish in stature, becoming more amenable to resolution. Our authenticity also plays a pivotal role in this dynamic. When we endeavor to embody a persona incongruent with our true selves, or compel ourselves down a trajectory that resonates disquietingly, it engenders an internal schism that siphons our vitality and imbues every endeavor with a sense of struggle. True ease blossoms when our actions are an honest emanation of our being, invigorated by emotions that propel our journey, rather than impede it. Now, let us confront a deeply ingrained societal dogma, the paradigm of hardship as virtue. For generations, we have been indoctrinated with the belief that suffering cultivates character, and that struggle is the sole authentic metric of worth. This collective narrative has coalesced into a potent internal framework for a multitude of us. Consequently, even when we achieve a goal with fluidity, efficiency, or without overt agony, a prickle of guilt may surface. We might inwardly muse, "This was too facile. I must not have merited it, or I ought to have amplified the difficulty to substantiate my worth." This ingrained framework compels us to perform struggle, to erect gratuitous obstacles, simply because we have been conditioned to believe that only through profound tribulation can success be validated. Consider Sarah. She possesses an extraordinary aptitude and a natural gift for creative problem solving. She secured a coveted new project at her workplace, one that had eluded her colleagues for months. Sarah approached the undertaking with a methodical grace, deploying her innate strengths and a handful of astute, efficient stratagems. Within weeks, she had delivered results of exceptional caliber, significantly ahead of the projected timeline. Yet, rather than basking in triumph, Sarah found herself ensnared by a disquieting knot of anxiety. Her supervisor, while evidently pleased, remarked, "It's truly impressive how you managed it all so swiftly, given its inherent complexity." This observation, though intended kindly, inadvertently reinforced Sarah's internal framework, that speed and efficiency were somehow less commendable than a palpable struggle. She began to downplay her accomplishments, almost apologizing for the perceived ease with which she navigated them. She found herself contemplating whether she should have deliberately decelerated her pace, introduced more challenges, merely to conform to the prevailing narrative of diligent effort. This is the hardship as virtue framework in its starkest manifestation, inducing us to question our own competencies and to devalue our natural propensities. This pervasive framework exerts a direct influence on our capacity for emotional regulation. It fosters anxiety, as we perpetually fret about not appearing to exert sufficient effort. It can precipitate feelings of inadequacy if our endeavors lack the outward semblance of arduousness. And it profoundly compromises our authenticity. When we are preoccupied with the performance of struggle, we are not inhabiting our genuine selves. We are enacting a script dictated by societal convention rather than embracing our unique talents and natural cadence. This ceaseless internal conflict, this disjunction between our inherent capabilities and the perceived requisites of success, is emotionally debilitating and precludes us from experiencing the profound satisfaction that accrues from aligned effort. Thus, how do we commence the dismantling of this hardship as virtue framework and pave the way for effortless success? We can initiate this process by posing ourselves a series of revealing shadow questions. These are inquiries designed to probe beneath the superficial layers, unearthing the unconscious beliefs that may be insidiously sabotaging our progress. Instead of inquiring, how can I intensify my efforts? We might instead ask, what am I afraid of forfeiting if this comes with ease? Or what fundamental aspect of my identity does this success challenge? These questions serve to illuminate the hidden resistances we have erected around the very notion of effortless achievement. Let us revisit Sarah's predicament. Had she posed herself the question, what does this success threaten about my identity? She might have unearthed a deeply entrenched conviction that her intrinsic worth was inextricably linked to her capacity to surmount formidable obstacles. Perhaps her father had consistently impressed upon her the adage, nothing truly valuable is achieved without great difficulty. This belief, operating at a subconscious level, engendered a sense of unease regarding her own efficiency. By asking, what do I relinquish by achieving this with ease? She might have recognized a latent fear of losing the admiration or respect she believed was exclusively bestowed upon those who endured hardship for their achievements. The acknowledgement of these shadow beliefs marks the initial, crucial step. It is not about dwelling in their shadow, but about bringing them into the light so that we may consciously elect to reframe them. This introspective inquiry is an exceptionally potent instrument for emotional control, as it empowers us to apprehend the genesis of our resistance and address it directly rather than merely grappling with its residual emotional fallout. Once these concealed resistances have been brought to light, the subsequent, indispensable phase is to actively cultivate an appreciation for effortless success. This necessitates a conscious challenging of the antiquated narrative and an embrace of a new one. We must recognize that efficiency, strategic acumen, intuition, and emotional alignment are not mere shortcuts. They are sophisticated instruments of mastery. They are the hallmarks of true proficiency. When we accord value to effortless success, we are, in essence, affirming that our intellect, our insight, and our capacity to navigate social dynamics with grace are inherently valuable. We are validating our own inherent ability for effective, less arduous accomplishment. This recalibration of valuation is profoundly intertwined with emotional superintendence. When we devalue our own facile successes, we are, in effect, seeking external validation predicated on the semblance of struggle. However, when we learn to cherish the inherent efficacy of our aligned efforts, our self-worth becomes an internally generated resource. We are no longer compelled to prove ourselves through overt hardship. This liberation liberates us from the emotional precipice of seeking approbation and permits us to experience a profound, unshakable sense of fulfillment. Authenticity flourishes when we can wholeheartedly embrace and celebrate our natural talents and our capacity to achieve results without gratuitous suffering. It signifies an ownership of our unique modus operandi in the world, rather than a futile attempt to conform to a paradigm that demands perpetual, visible struggle. This leads us to the critical dichotomy between internal validation and external corroboration. The unremitting compulsion to demonstrate that our success was earned through immense difficulty frequently stems from a deep-seated yearning for external affirmation. We may unconsciously seek the approval of parental figures, peers, or society at large, operating under the conviction that only by elucidating our arduous journey will we be deemed worthy. This external orientation renders us vulnerable. Our sense of accomplishment becomes contingent upon how others perceive our exertion, precipitating anxiety and an incessant need to perform. True effortless success, conversely, is engendered by internal validation. It is the quiet assurance that arises from the knowledge that one's actions were consonant with one's values, one's strategy, was sound and one's emotional state fostered the pursuit. It is the comprehension that one's efforts are valid and impactful, irrespective of whether another witnessed the struggle. When you operate from a locus of internal validation, you cease to seek permission to feel commendable about your achievements. You know you are deserving because you acted with integrity and efficacy. This represents the ultimate form of emotional control. Your self-worth is not an external commodity to be acquired, but an internal reservoir that is perpetually accessible. And it is here that authenticity truly blossoms. Your actions are guided by your own internal compass, not by the imperatives or expectations of others. You are liberated to be your authentic self, to achieve in your own unique fashion, and to genuinely savor the fruits of your labor without the encumbrance of justifying the perceived magnitude of your effort. Consider the stark contrast. On one periphery, you have an individual who incessantly recounts their paucity of sleep, the myriad late nights they endured, the sacrifices they made for their project. Such accounts may elicit nods of sympathy and admiration for their perceived dedication. Internally, however, they may harbor feelings of exhaustion, resentment, and a questioning of whether the outcome was truly commensurate with their suffering. On the other periphery, you encounter an individual who, through astute planning, effective delegation, and a crystalline understanding of their objectives, achieves an equivalent or even superior outcome with demonstrably less visible strain. If propelled by internal validation, they experience a profound sense of satisfaction, pride, and gratitude. They have no need to boast about their minimal sleep, they simply know they executed with proficiency. Their success is a testament to their skill and their capacity to navigate challenges with emotional equanimity, not a badge of honor for enduring misery. The concept of social framing is integral to this entire discourse. The societal framework of hardship as virtue constitutes a potent, often unconscious, narrative that shapes our perception of success. It is a socially imposed lens that dictates that struggle is the sole legitimate pathway. By comprehending this framework, we can begin to discern its influence on our emotional responses and our authentic expression. When we recognize the existence of this framework, we gain the agency to transcend it. We can actively construct a new framework, one that esteems efficiency, intelligence, and emotional alignment. This is the very essence of social alchemy, the transmutation of the base metal of societal expectations into the resplendent gold of personal empowerment and authentic achievement. By redefining our very conception of success, we unlock a potent avenue toward both emotional mastery and authentic existence. The capacity to achieve with ease, not through indolence but through strategic perception and emotional control, represents a profound skill. It empowers us to navigate life with enhanced joy, diminished resistance, and a deeper resonance with our authentic selves. The subsequent logical progression in our journey of social alchemy entails an exploration of how these principles of framing and emotional control can be deployed to navigate and neutralize the manipulative frames that others may endeavor to impose upon us. This will ensure that our hard-won ease and authenticity remain impervious to external pressures, thereby solidifying our capacity to architect our own social reality. Conclusion. As you close this book, may you carry forth a transformed vision. We have traversed the subtle, often concealed, terrain of human connection, unearthing the invisible scaffolding that underpins social perception. The fundamental truth remains elegantly simple yet profoundly impactful. Our grasp of reality is frequently sculpted by the vantage point, the very frame through which we apprehend it. Social engagements are far more than mere exchanges of words. They are often delicate contests waged over these very interpretations. To master social framing is to comprehend the construction of these frames, their pervasive influence, and, most crucially, how to artfully erect and judiciously manage your own. This newfound awareness is now an intrinsic part of your being, a fresh lens through which the world will unfold. We have delved into the understanding that mere recognition of frames is but the initial stride. True enchantment, the genuine alchemy of social interaction, ignites when awareness blossoms into action. You have cultivated the discernment to detect when others endeavor to impose their frames upon you, to recognize when their Utterances or deeds are deliberately calibrated to steer your perspective toward their own. The paramount strategy is to elude their snares. Recall the principle of offering nothing or adopting an air of unremarkable plainness when confronted with negativity. This is not an embrace of passivity, but a resolute refusal to capitulate to their framing, a deliberate withholding of the very reaction they seek. Then, there is the potent art of reframing. Revisit the image of the job applicant who transmuted a perceived deficiency into a distinct advantage. This is social framing in its most dynamic form. It is the art of shifting perspective, of re-scripting the narrative. And at the very heart of this endeavor lies your internal frame, your capacity for self-amusement, your steadfast ability to remain rooted and unassailable. This inner fortitude serves as your bulwark against the tempests of external judgment. The frame game is not an exercise in deception, it is a dance of deliberate intent, an application of the tools you now possess to navigate the intricate tapestry of social landscapes with seasoned skill. This profound comprehension of social framing is, at its essence, a reclamation of your personal agency. It bestows upon you the power of choice in circumstances where you once felt adrift. When you can meticulously identify the frames others employ, you cease to be a passive recipient of their interpretations. You ascend to the status of an active architect of your own social reality. This is an experience of unparalleled liberation, fostering an unshakable resilience. When censure descends, or when individuals attempt to exert undue influence, an understanding of framing empowers you to deflect their advances. You gain the capacity to consciously refuse to buy into their disparaging view of yourself or the prevailing circumstances. This mastery over your emotional state, this ability to preserve your internal equilibrium irrespective of external pressures, is an extraordinary gift. Furthermore, this cultivated skill directly propels you toward your desired outcomes. By framing situations with astute precision, you can forge more robust relationships, navigate contentious dialogues with enhanced grace, and inexorably advance toward your personal and professional aspirations. It is also profoundly illuminating to acknowledge that an understanding of frames can expose our own ingrained patterns, our own concealed shadows that may impede our progress. This depth of self-awareness is an indispensable component of this transformative journey. The attainment of mastery in social framing is not a terminal point, but rather a continuous unfolding. Social interactions are inherently fluid, perpetually in motion, and thus, our approach must mirror this dynamism. The most vital counsel I can impart is to consistently inhabit your frame. This signifies an unwavering adherence to your own perspective, your deeply held values, and your authentic sense of self, even when external forces seek to dislodge you. It is about maintaining that unwavering internal anchor. Perceive social interactions as a vibrant, ever-evolving game, one whose intricate mechanics you now possess the understanding and the skill to navigate with playful adeptness. Each conversation, each encounter, presents itself as a fertile ground for observation, for learning, and for the refinement of your capacity to perceive and to influence perspectives. This sustained practice is the very soul of social alchemy. Therefore, as you re-engage with the world, hold this truth close. You possess the inherent power to sculpt your social reality. You are no longer merely a participant in the grand game of perception. You are its discerning, masterful architect. Embrace this power. Command your frames. Step forth and shape your world with deliberate intent, with unwavering resilience, and with the profound grace that emanates from genuine understanding. The power to frame is unequivocally the power to transform. Wield it with wisdom,